COVID era courts are in hotels to be extended as the justice crisis worsens. I'm going to read into this exclusive from the iPaper, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from the iPaper with the headline that the COVID era courts in hotels has been extended as justice crisis worsens. The government's decision to keep Nightingale courts open have been criticised by some senior barristers who aren't convinced that the best use of public money. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. So, for those who haven't been aware, the Nightingale, some of these Nightingale courts were being used as extensions, obviously, after the global pandemic, when we were in lockdown. You know, one of many situations, many things, obviously, that people didn't talk a lot about was courts. You know, a lot of cases, criminal cases, needed to be held in court, and they needed to be done. And what happened was, of course, a backlog was filling up of them. So they needed to be dealt with. So at the time, they were so-called Nightingale courts, and that was certain buildings that being used not as proper, and they weren't like a proper courtroom, but they were used as temporary to help deal with the backlogs. Now, what's happened since then is that for all the way till now, even though there wasn't that many at the time. After the pandemic, they think they used about maybe couple of places, but not a lot. But they were still kept being used, and it seems like a lot of the taxpayer money is still being used for this situation. And one of the arguments that are going to be from some of the judges and the barristers here is that this money should actually be used in the courtrooms that we have, and some of them haven't been used properly for a while. Instead of using these temporary accommodations that we're using to try people. And we have a massive backlog. There is a massive backlog, and we'll see the number. I think it's about 70,000 plus is the backlog, which is extremely worrying. Actually extremely bad to have such a humongous backlog. I mean, it's bad enough when you have a backlog of like 2,000, 3,000. We're talking about 73,000, 70,000 plus cases. Potential criminal cases being backlogged. What kind of justice is that? There is no justice, and we know that it's going to take time for this Labour government to show what it can do. But the reason that they're going to be extending this is their argument is that we need every single court that we possibly can to help deal with this backlog to try and bring it down. Now, whether they will bring it down, I don't know. And I think what will really save, and I've said this about the National Healthcare Service as well. So I'm going to put this in the same thing, right? I said at the start of this year, we have to see, by the end of this year, I want to see signs that the NHS, that the healthcare service is going in the right direction. This is exactly what I want to see when it comes to court cases. We have a huge backlog of court cases. So when it comes to the end of this year, I want to see I want to see some improvements. I want to actually see that the cases are actually going down instead of going up. That we're actually seeing that change in dividends. And I understand that some senior barristers aren't convinced this is best use of public money, and we'll read into that. But for me, the priority is making sure that these are being heard, that these cases, these courts are being opened, and that these trials are taking place. And it's really important that they take place. And I really do think we need to look into getting more barristers, getting more judges as well. We need to really look at, how much money are we using in the justice system? Is it being used the right way as well? Do we need to use more? Because especially if you want to be considered a party of law and order, you're talking about boosting police numbers, community policing. We also need to make sure the system that we have is there in place to ensure that these people face the courts and face the full wrath of the law. It's not really much when some of them are waiting as much as 3 years before their case is being heard. It's not really ideal, if I'm honest, guys. So, the mounting backlog crisis in the criminal justice system has forced ministers to keep so-called Nightingale courts open in hotels and conference centres years after they were meant to deal with the pandemic delays. So, with the starting dates of some trials now being pushed back to 2028. 2028. Some of them as back as 3 years. It's 3 years. Like, the Ministry of Justice plans to extend contracts for the temporary courts to maximise capacity in England and Wales. The backlog has been leading to more distressed victims pulling out of the prosecutions and have left some defendants feeling trapped in legal purity. Like, this just is deflating for those who want their justice. It's very deflating for those. The government says that Nightingales are part of its commitment to bearing down the backlog, which has almost doubled in 5 years, and it now stands at more than 73,000 cases. Let's be clear, yeah? I understand some people want to say, oh, this is Labour's fault and whatnot. No, this is 14 years of Conservatives. This is the austerity. This is them cutting back on lots of things. I've talked a number of times about the cuts that they've done to many departments, and the criminal justice system is another thing that has suffered as a result as well. Let's be very, very clear about that. But some senior barristers are frustrated that another chunk of the limited justice budget will be spent on these temporary facilities, where many permanent courtrooms are being left unused because of the financial shortfall. Now, if this is true, that's a big problem. If that is the case, then they should be prioritising some of that money towards permanent courtrooms that aren't being used. There should be no reasons not to be using courtrooms that are there. I generally do have questions of why these permanent courtrooms are not being used if we have them, instead of temporary facilities. They believe that declining numbers of duty solicitors and of barristers specialising in low-pay criminal cases, plus insufficient funding to provide enough judges, are the bigger issues behind the delayed hearings. Old buildings and overstretched staff are also to slow things down. Yeah, this is another problem as well. You need to... it's all well and good having the buildings, but if you don't have the people behind it, if we don't have the judges, if we don't have the solicitors, if we don't have the barristers, we don't have the lawyers, it's not going to work, because you need to have the people for it. And it's not, and the thing is as well, and I think this is quite an interesting point, and I'm sure if anybody's an expert in this area, please feel free to add down in the comments below. But I don't think this is like something where we can get some people in abroad to do it, because it's not like, well, no, because they don't understand the British law. Like, the system is different to wherever you learnt your laws and trades and whatnot. So I don't think it's not. So this really is a case of we need to make sure we're investing in new solicitors and barristers and judges. We really need to. The impact is so bad that several trials have recently been scheduled to begin in 2028. These include a fraud case involving 2 alleged victims who will be their early 80s by the time it gets underway, 8 years after they claim the crime happened. Others involve the alleged assault of an emergency worker in 2023 and drug offences. The first Nightingale courts opened in England and Wales in August 2020 to help deal with the backlog. At one point, they were operating at 32 locations. Most occupied town halls or courts have recently been closed by cuts. More initiative venues, including the Low Tree Theatre in Salford and Bolton Wanderers Football Stadium. They used a football stadium. The last remaining 10 sites, including the hotel in South London and Swansea Civil Centre, provided 24 courtrooms which were due to close in March. Most of these are now expected to remain open for at least another 12 months, a Whitehall source revealed. They said decisions should be formally announced in January, so they haven't announced it at the time of this recording. The Ministry of Justice confirmed to the iPaper that its plans include continuing to use Nightingale courts. The leading barrister, Mary Priya KC, chair of the Criminal Bar Association, CBA, is sceptical of that temporary venues that are worth the money. Nightingale courts could have an important role to play in dealing with trials if it means that they are listed earlier than 2027 onwards, said Priya. They are much more expensive to run than our Crown Court buildings, and there are at least 20% of Crown Court rooms sitting empty, and they're empty most days. Some of the investment earmarks for Nightingale Court should be spent on using every Crown Court every single day of the week and ensuring that the criminal barristers who prosecute and defend these cases there are paid enough to make them stay in criminal law. if this comes down to a situation where then they're not earning enough money, that they're not doing that Monday to Fridays on a case, then that needs to change. It should be used. Courtroom should be used every Monday to Friday. I know they have weekends off because of the way the system works, but there should not be a situation where then not every single day is not being used during that time when it comes to these cases, and also the costs, the costs behind their wages. If it's not good enough, then it needs to change. Nightingale courts in the backlog crisis, and the number of cases waiting to be heard in the Crown Courts in England and Wales was already growing before the COVID-19 pandemic. This is why I meant by austerity, guys. Again, this is under the Conservatives. In early 2020, it stood at nearly 41,000. So 41,000. This was before COVID struck. So before then, when everything had to stop because of COVID, already 41,000 at the backlog. Now, obviously, I can't speak of what it was back in 2010. If you want to look it up, you're more than welcome to. But still, the very fact that for a long period they were in power and they've allowed this to happen, it is in a sense a miscarriage of justice on innocent people as well. Many courts closed during lockdown, worsening the situation. Boris Johnson's government opened the first 10 temporary Nightingale courts in August that year to help with reducing delays and delivering speedier justice for victims. More followed in the subsequent months. The backlog continued rising sharply, however, it is still doing so. It now stands at a record 73,105, approaching double the pre-pandemic level. The number could hit 100,000 unless rational action is taken, according to a recent warning from Anthony Rogers, Chief Inspector of the Crown Prosecution Service. If it hits 100,000, that's really bad, because it shows people. You know, that number will just say to criminals, like, we can get away with it. Like, unless they throw us in prison for until our case is heard. You know, innocent until proven guilty is the argument there. Like, we already seen, like, it just said there, like, it's like up till 2028. Some of them are waiting 3 years. We need more people on this. This is the socially distanced courtroom which was opened in Salford Lowry Hotel. So they were using this at one point as well as a courtroom. The Crown Court backlog has become so dire that even some alleged rape victims are having to wait longer than 2 years before they can give evidence in a trial. This is resulting in more cases collapsing. I covered a while ago some rape cases where some women had to wait up to 5.5 years for their cases to be heard. They shouldn't even be waiting 6 months for their case. And I remember it specifically saying that some of them were waiting as long as 5 years. And they're just saying in this one 2 years. No, some of them were waiting longer than that. And the cases are collapsing, which means that these perpetrators who did them walk the streets again and after what they did, which can lead to, guess what, more crime as a result, because the case collapsed because the victim couldn't wait any longer. This is a massive failure of our justice system, and it should be incredibly shameful. The number of rape cases waiting to be heard now is 3,291, an increase of 476% from the record low of 2019, and is still rising according to analysis of official data by the CBA, which represents specialist criminal barristers. The time it takes for cases to conclude from the day of an alleged crime takes place has also risen by more than 50% to an average of 735 days for all types of offences. 735 days, Jesus. The government's recent announcement that courts in England and Wales will be able to sit for an extra 2,000 days this financial year, taking the total to 108,500 days. That would be a higher figure in almost a decade. The court officials have said that the system could cater for 113,000 sitting days if the governments were prepared to pay. This is the thing, comes down to money. Pay them the money so that justice can be made. The Justice Secretary Shabina Mahmood said it is vital we do everything we can to bring down the backlogs of cases and ensure victims see justice sooner. More radical but controversial solutions to the backlog are also being considered through an independent review of criminal courts that was announced in December. The former Judge Sir Brian Leveson will examine whether to reduce the use of jury trials by creating intermediate courts where verdicts could be decided by a judge together with magistrates instead of 12 members of the public. He's expected to publish his recommendations in the spring. Now, I don't like this. I don't like that a judge making the immediate decision. However, I do think these intermediate courts, if there's something like this needs to be occurred to help stop this case rising, then I think it's something that needs to be strongly considered. Although I don't like it, but the fact that the cases are still going up and it could reach 100,000 is incredibly frightening, because then once again it shows that our failure of our system is failing. However, some experts worry that the government is still shying away from providing the money the system needs. Yeah. The CBA's Vice Chair, Ryle Carmine Jones KC, said the criminal case backlog and the delays to criminal trials aren't just numbers. They represent tens of thousands of people whose lives are on hold. They affect and punish defendants, witnesses and victims of crimes equally. She added, public lose faith in the justice system, then law and order starts to unravel, and there is a risk that some may abandon the process or even take the law into their own hands. Conference suits at Leonardo Hotel in Croydon, South London, were leased by the Ministry of Justice and transformed into 2 Nightingale courtrooms in March 2021. By August 2024, they had reportedly cost $2.9 million to operate. They were expected to close in March, but are now very likely to be among those staying open. Lists showing that Croydon's Nightingale has not hosted a Crown Court hearing since early November. Instead, it's currently devoted to cases in the family court systems, which deals with disputes about whose children live with who and who has contact with them. Family courts are suffering from their own alarming backlogs, and in March, the Law Society, which represents solicitors, warns that more than 100,000 were trapped in the system, with cases taking more than 11 months to be resolved. That's really bad. 11 months. So that's the Leonardo Hotel there. Barrister Sam Townsend KC, the outgoing chair of the Bar Council of 2024, gave Nightingale's news a cautious welcome, but argued there are bigger concerns that must be addressed. The backlogs in the Crown Court grew by 10% over the last year, so we desperately need more capacity in the criminal justice system, he said. We welcome the grave increase in court sitting this financial year, but it's essential in future years that these are fixed early and transparency to avoid cases being taken off the list. The Leveson Review will look at the long-term structural damage, but in the meantime, we continue to make cases for greater resources to be injected into the system, to fix the crumbling courts, and ensure we have enough barristers to undertake public funding works in the future. Yeah, I forgot about the crumbling courts. I'm not sure if it's if it's rack like schools and hospitals. It could be, but the fact that we have some court buildings are in disrepair, they should be dealt with immediately. Scotland, which has a separate legal system, has also suffered from post-pandemic backlog. However, it significantly reduced this by opening extra courts and removing jury centres in cinemas, and through reforms that resolve less serious cases more swiftly. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, the government inherited a justice system in crisis with a record and rising court caseload which delays and denies justices for far too many victims. That's why we continue to bearing down on the backlog and have asked Sir Brian Leveson to conduct a major review into Crown Courts in order to speed up justice for victims. This is on top of the further 2,500 sitting days that we have announced, taking the total to 108,500 this year and continuing to use Nightingale courts across the system for more to hear. And this is obviously the urgent warning from judges as well, which I will leave there for now, but we've had more than enough here to know. Like, we knew that a criminal justice system is under great threat. But reading that and the backlogs is the fact that backlog was really bad before the pandemic. Just infuriates me, because they used it as a shield. They could use it as a shield, COVID. Just like they use COVID as a shield for what's happening with Brexit, the Conservatives. And they let this happen. They let our criminal system fail. And this is the situation that we are in. I think, obviously, I know that people always come down to, where do you get the money for this, money that. We're talking about justice. We're talking about criminals who have perpetrated crimes. We're talking about cases that need to be heard, and these all are being sat on the shelf. These are huge disruptions to society if these are not being dealt with, and it's getting worse. It is getting worse. These must be dealt with. They must be dealt with as soon as possible. And the criminal justice system should be given the adequate resources it needs to ensure it gets them done. They really do. Yes, I understand the money side of it, but there's a social side of this as well. And it has a wider impact on the criminals, on the criminal justice system. It questions people's whether they can trust and rely on the justice to be done against perpetrators. Puts people off maybe even calling the police because they feel that, oh well, the police will arrest them, but they won't actually face court and face time because of the system that we have in place. It's obviously, we've talked about the prison system and the crisis that it is in. It's just a fundamental failure, and it's failing, and it needs to be getting a grip of. So what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the courts that were being used, the situation around them? Did we think it would be as bad as this? Nearly 40,000 cases. Then that was before the pandemic. Let me know your thoughts and more on this situation down in the comments section below. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.